Afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Sussex Heritage Community. My name's Daryl Holter, and I look after the Sussex Heritage Community page and website. So today I'm going to give a talk on, or talk about threats to our heritage and heritage crime. So we have a choice to defend our heritage, past, present, and future. Some take our past heritage for granted. Some forget it is amongst our present. We walk on it, drive through it, and fly over it. To many I have met, it brings belief, understanding, feeling, depth, culture, and emotion. Also a sense of community, ownership, tradition, and belonging. It is tangible, it has mystery, it is constant and priceless. Our future generations should have opportunity to rediscover, experience, and interpret the old and the new. We are but custodians of a rich heritage, and this heritage tells of our journey through the ages. But when it falls victim to abuse, it is the moral responsibility of all of us to protect our past, and we must do this together. Together, as a group or a family, we become a community. Communities watch over our heritage, and like-minded communities stand together. Together, we can preserve our past. So what are the threats to our shared heritage? Well, historic buildings, churches, houses, castles, forts, earthworks, battlefields, wreck sites, and other historic sites are simply sources of illicit gain, damage, or diversion. These heritage assets are often exploited with no regard to what they may represent to the communities in which they are located. Those who, for instance, are knowingly buying stolen scrap metal or stolen relics from heritage assets are creating a market. Many of these buildings have been around for hundreds of years, surviving world wars, the elements of time and nature that are now being spoiled by us. So threats to our heritage can be organised and be carried out by individuals or in groups. A further threat is apathy, and this is sometimes the biggest threat of all. This can be difficult to preempt, and it underlines the need for constant vigilance on the part of everyone who believes such things are important. What are the reasons behind those threats? Well, there are several reasons, from greed, selfishness, sheer wanton vandalism, a misguided self-belief of saving our heritage, simply having little or no knowledge. Who do these threats affect? Well, churches are often a victim. Offertory boxes, for example, are forced open for the items stolen for the donations they may contain. Lead is indiscriminately pulled up off of roofs, tiles and stonework taken, or stained glass windows removed. All are a testament to the skills of medieval craftsmen, and many are damaged or smashed beyond repair, destroying in a moment something that has been familiar to and appreciated by generations. These acts often damage the very fabric of the building. Their impact is immeasurable, as even though items might be restored or replaced, the link to the past has gone forever. These acts can have a devastating impact on local communities, far outweighing the material loss suffered. As you'll see, it affects all of us. So, examples of heritage crime. What to look out for? Theft. Well, here we are at historic St Mary's Church in Rye. One of its most valuable stained glass windows was removed and essentially stolen. It is now gone, and I don't doubt that the rest of that window would have been taken if at all possible. I should also mention that other than the window being stolen, if you look at the stonework, as in the bottom right hand picture, you can see damage to that listed church. To get that window out, you see damage to the stonework. Here we are in East Sussex, and here is a church which is a victim to a lead theft. Now, of course, this church probably had no idea that the lead had gone until the water started raining in through the roof. And just picture for a moment, if that is a church that you or your family or your friends are going to use, might be for a wedding, it could be for a funeral. Can you imagine turning up on that day and finding out that you either can't use the church now, or you can't maybe use the organ that's in the church, or maybe the church is used for, let's say, a nursery for children or other activities? This type of theft has a massive knock-on effect. On the right-hand side, you'll see a church over in West Sussex. This time, criminals have attempted to steal the peg tiles off of the roof of this listed church. And whilst we go through talking about these slides, you'll see there is a value in all these different materials. So moving on, here on the left-hand side is a church in Eastbourne, and you can see that the copper roof has been folded back where people have tried to steal the copper from the roof. You can see there the estimated loss of £7,000. On the right-hand side is a picture of a historic building in East Sussex, and here you can see the lightning conductor is the opportunity to the criminal. They could easily take that. It's made of copper. In this slide, you're looking at a lead theft, and on the far left-hand side, you'll see that this is the bottom of that war memorial in Eastbourne, where the lead was stolen. And then in the centre slide and to the right-hand side, where the lead is now being replaced by a local company. Absolutely awful. This is a war memorial. Lead is worth about 70p to £1.20 a kilo. It's not worth a great deal of money, but look at the impact it's having on communities. Here we are in West Hopefully. This time, instead of lead, we're talking about brass. And you can see that 52 brass plaques, memorials, if you like, were all stolen from the church graveyard. That's 52 families now that have got to be contacted and told that that memorial, that place, that special place, that plaque has gone. That again is has an incredible impact on family, has an incredible impact on community. So we're now looking at brass being the object of why these plaques have gone. And again, we've spoken about lead, we've spoken about copper, we've spoken about glass, we've spoken about stonework. So you can probably see where the values in these things are going. Here we have 6 3-metre cast iron drain pipes stolen from a Grade 1 listed 10th century church. This was in 2019. Now, to pinch these, you've got to, it's almost done to order, isn't it? You don't just turn up and pinch them. 6 3-metre cast iron drain pipes, you can't just pop in your car. So it's going in a trailer, it's going in a van, it's going in a something that's big. Somebody's thought about this before they were stolen, so most likely stolen to order. And it's probably for, a reclamation, ornamental value. They probably won't have travelled far, but this is the damage, this Grade 1 listed church. Here we are at Madeira Terraces in Brighton, December 2019. But I know that the theft here took place over Christmas of 2019. And what you're looking at here is the theft of copper and lead, and 10 tons of it. Again, you're not sticking it in your rucksack or in the boot of your car. You are organised. You have come here knowing what you're doing, knowing what's needed, probably a group of you. And then you've got to out this. You're not going to just keep it in your back garden. This is organised. So lead and copper, again, being the target. Here we are on the left-hand side. This is desperately sad. It's desperately sad that the brass memorial plaques were stolen earlier. Here we are at a gravestone where the lead lettering has been prized out of the gravestone. And think of this, lead is worth 70p to £1.20 a kilo. That's a bag of sugar. How much really value is there in those lead letters? Nothing. But again, the impact is immeasurable. Somebody had to tell that family what happened. That is absolutely awful. All for the lead. On the right hand side, this is a museum in Sussex, again sadly targeted for lead, and the lead would have gone round the top of that stonework, capping it if you like. Now, it's not an especially old museum, but the point is museums hold lots of old things. So we need to be looking out for not just historic buildings, we need to be looking out for those museums and buildings that hold these, incredibly rare and important artifacts that we cherish so dearly. Now, moving on, here we are at St Mary's Church at Storrington, and you can see here somebody has forced their way in to the church on the left hand side, and here's another church on the right hand side where an offertory box has been target. And to be quite honest, it's not about the tin box, it's not about the pounds or the pence that's inside, it's about the listed building. Somebody has gone there with a jemmy bar and forced that thing out the wall, and they've damaged the wall. That's the important thing here. On the left hand side in that Church of St Mary's, it's damage to the building again. Things to keep in mind. Sadly, here we are at a church now. Where are we? In Clayton, Sussex, and the keyboard was stolen in this church, and it's believed that the criminals were probably thought that the keyboard keys themselves were made of ivory. That is not the case. There was an ivory veneer on top of the keys, but of course they've pinched the whole keyboard. The issue here is that's the organ in the church. We go back to talking about weddings for a moment. That's your wedding, the following day or the next week. You've got no organ. The effect to the community is massive. And of course, where are they going to pick up another organ keyboard to fit that organ? It's probably not going to be readily available and at a great cost to that congregation. So there is, again, a massive effect on the community. Now, moving over to bronze for a moment. So we've spoken about brass, copper, lead. I've spoken about glass and stonework. Let's talk about bronze for a moment. So bronze sculptures generally are the things that get pinched. And here we have a war memorial in Eversholt, which is certainly north of Sussex, a long way up the country. I know Eversholt very well, and I was made aware of what happened here, and it was absolutely awful for that local community. It's already been pinched once, this memorial. So there is hope that it will come back like it did first time round. But made of bronze has a value. On the right hand side here is another bronze statue, this time from Hazelmere in Sussex, again pinched most likely for its bronze value. Moving on, sadly, I mean, this is awful, isn't it? World War I memorials. We probably all remember seeing these all around Sussex, and we still do now. It's still commonplace. But people were even pinching these. How very, very low. Now, you heard me talk about organised crime earlier. I'm going to talk for a moment about theft of heritage assets and organised crime. So here is Grade 1 listed Bramber House. And what you're looking at in the centre picture is 70 York stone slabs that were pinched overnight. And this happened now back in 2015, but this was targeted for that stonework. And on the right hand side, you've got a World War I memorial in Patcham that again had a large quantity of York stone slabs stolen. You don't just pop it in your car like with the lead and the copper. You are organised. If you're going here to do this kind of thing overnight, then you've done your homework. You've probably stolen this to order. You know where that's going. Seriously organised, not good at all. And of course, to these a war memorial and a listed building, but York stone slab here this time being the target to the criminals. Now, and quite rightly, thousands of pounds to replace and repair, the original stone, of course, being irreplaceable. For a moment, post boxes. So you will see here that thieves will target post boxes. Post boxes have a value ornamentally, really, there is a market for people buying post boxes. And you'll see here a number of examples of post box thefts. Edwardian, Georgian, Victorian boxes all have great values, and people will still buy them. So you see somebody hanging around post boxes looking suspicious, out of place, odd, then you report it. That's very, very, obviously. I should also say these post boxes make up the fabric of many, many villages and small communities. They've been here for a very long time. It's part of our social history and history. We should be looking after these items. Mileposts, the same. Who knew mileposts would have a value? But they do, and people will pinch them. And here we have a milepost stolen from the side of the A22 in East Sussex. Again, it's the ornamental value. There's 9,000 remaining nationwide. They're unique to the location they stand on. Many were removed or defaced during the Second World War, and others have been demolished by road widening schemes, collision damage, or whilst hedgerows and verges have been cutting. We need to look after these. These are part of our street furniture from yesteryear. It's part of our history and our heritage, and they've all got a story to tell. We need to look after them. I should also mention, and I'm glad this is here. This is so important because our motoring heritage. When we talk about history and heritage, a lot of people think about things that are hundreds of thousands of years old. But our motoring heritage is just as important. So this Manx Norton motorcycle that was stolen from Hastings a good few years ago now, this, you can see, £30,000 plus value, but actually it's so rare and so important that it's a massive part of our, certainly, motorcycle heritage. And I don't doubt that there are many other vehicles in our motoring heritage that are targeted for crime. They demand high values. So the criminal will turn to pinching really anything that has a value. So we need to keep an eye out for our motoring heritage. So let's talk about damage by graffiti for a moment. It won't shock or surprise you, but sadly, graffiti gets daubed on our heritage or our historic environment. And here we have a World War II pillbox in Cookmere Valley, as you can see, as being targeted with graffiti. And on the right-hand side, Shoreham Fort, a 43-year-old man was caught and prosecuted for graffitiing these tags on that fort, which is a scheduled ancient monument built in 1857, one of the Palmerston forts, massively important historically to us, played a major part in the defence of our coast. And this is how it's treated. Now, you're probably wondering why is that so much of a big deal? Well, I'll tell you. Paint, brickwork and mortar, the brickwork and mortar is porous. So you spray paint onto that. Literally the brickwork sucks that paint in. Now you can't just clean it, and you certainly can't just clean a scheduled ancient monument. That has to be done by experts and professionals. So that is why this graffiti is a problem, but also graffiti attracts graffiti. So if it's not dealt with quickly and swiftly and cleaned off, before you know it, you've got even more of a problem. Here's some more examples around Sussex. So Rye at the Mary Stanford Lifeboat House, Grade 2 listed. A lot of the tram stops, bus stops in Brighton, the Volks Railway, they hadn't even finished building that and it was getting daubed in graffiti. Not good news. So let's talk about criminal damage for a moment. And we're back into churches. This time we're looking at statues in churches in the centre picture. Unfortunately, this church being victim to criminal damage where the statue was smashed. On the right-hand side is another church. This time round, fire extinguishers being let off in the church. Firstly, fire extinguishers are for fire, aren't they? But when let off like this, the powder can be incredibly corrosive. So if you've got any artwork or fabrics inside that church, this is not good for that. As a result of antisocial behaviour, that's what happened to that church on the right-hand side. Incredibly dangerous mainly around the fire aspect, of course, but then what damage it can cause internally to the church. Talk about arson for a moment. On the left-hand side, here is a news report from Hastings. New Year's Eve, this church got broken into, and you can see on the right-hand side, the nativity actually got set alight. You imagine if that had got out of control, that whole church would have gone. On the right-hand side, we have another church. This time it's a wheelie bin that's been set alight. And it's not really the wheelie bin that concerns me so much. It's the damage now to that wall and the listed building, and who's going to clean it up, and how much will it cost to clean up, and what damage has it done to that wall. So not good news. Here we are in Crowhurst in East Sussex. This time, poor St George's Church being target to vandalism, antisocial behaviour, whereby people are throwing stones at the window, and you can see in the circled areas on the presentation here where the stone's been battered up against that metal grille on the outside and smashed that window. So to fix that window, you can see on the right hand picture here the woodwork placed inside the hole to temporarily cover that window opening after the stained glass window was removed. But look at the stonework and the damage to the stonework in order to get the window out. So it's not just a case of criminal damage now, damage to the stained glass window, but it's causing more damage to get the window out, all from people throwing rocks and stones from outside the church. So we're now looking at a listed building. This is one of the seafront structures in Bexhill, and unfortunately here this has been subjected to a great amount of antisocial behaviour and criminal damage, wooden panels and benches being broken and damaged, and in one case the centre beam that you're looking at in the right hand picture was cut through with a saw. You can also see on that centre beam on the right hand side, you can see a piece of red decoration. On the left hand side, that's gone. It's things like this that are really important that we look after them. Going back to museums for a moment, I spoke about a museum over in West Sussex had lead stolen. Well, here we are at Bexhill Museum on the left hand side with a window that's been smashed as a result of antisocial behaviour, and another window at Battle Museum having the same thing, antisocial behaviour. All this adds up. Okay, these are costs to a museum that, frankly, that they're doing their best, but they don't need to be spending their money on trying to fix antisocial behaviour, criminal damage. Okay. Now we're back at Shoreham Fort for a moment. You heard me talk about Shoreham Fort earlier. Unfortunately, Shoreham Fort pretty much has seen every type of crime. And what you're looking at here is criminal damage to the fort loopholes on the left-hand side, which these were new. These were just, all the fort loopholes were repaired, and as soon as they were repaired, people were back down the fort throwing stones through the loopholes again. Now you can see there, £1,850 each to repair. There's a lot of loopholes at that fort. That's a lot of money for really a charity, which is what the Friends of Shoreham Fort are. They don't have that money to repair that. People should not be abusing this scheduled ancient monument in this way, but yet they are. But also you'll see this little tea hut here, food for fort. Unfortunately, that got broken into. That's another way of the Friends of Shoreham Fort being able to get a little bit of revenue by selling teas and coffees and other such things, but it was broken into, and that's just not helpful to a charity. On the right hand side, you can see part of the fort has actually had a step stolen, and on the lower right hand picture, the Friends do a great deal of work in basically looking out and looking after this fort and clearing it and cleaning it, and that means there's some areas that have to be heritage fenced off for the safety of the public, but unfortunately antisocial behaviour comes along and starts to damage those areas. So poor old Shoreham Fort does get a lot of troubles, but there's a lot of good work going on there. The Friends are doing a fantastic job and supported by the community. So we're going to look at briefly at World War II. So we're looking on the left hand side at some anti-tank dragon's teeth that are down at Cookmere Valley. And unfortunately, what you're looking at here is unlawful excavation and damage to a triple SI, to these tank defences. And basically somebody's come along and I went there, I looked at this, and you can see they've carefully dug down the back of these tank traps, probably looking to see how they're designed or how they're made, but all without permission and in an area that's a triple SI. So a massive no-no. On the right-hand side, we've got a pillbox foundation from Little Galley Hill in Bexhill. And when I spoke about graffiti earlier on, talking about paintwork and stonework being porous and sucking that graffiti, sucking the paint in, what you're looking at here is exactly that. Now, this is a particularly interesting pillbox foundation close by to where Spike Milligan served for a short period of time during World War II, made famous for that. But also it's being quite, or was being quite weathered and undermined, but that's now been rectified, which is great. The paintwork is now off it, which is wonderful. And it's just something we need to look out for, because our World War II heritage is so important. We're coming up to a centenary of that. We've got to look after it. And then anti-tank cylinders. Could you believe somebody pinched an anti-tank cylinder? It's a massive lump of concrete, but it's important. It tells a part of our defence here in the South Coast, and for somebody to pinch that, if they all went, you know, what do we know? We're losing our story. So it's important that we understand that too. Now I'm going to talk about damage and destruction. So under the Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Areas Act of 1979, it's a criminal offence to cause damage to a scheduled monument. Now, we've spoken about Shoreham Fort being a scheduled monument. In fact, there is a number of scheduled monuments in Sussex. But looking here, I'm taking you to a Neolithic causewayed enclosure over in Eastbourne. And I've titled it here, Irreparable Damage and Loss of Archaeology, because that is what's going on. So you're looking at damage caused by a 4x4 vehicle, car. What is not obvious is the potential irreparable damage to any artifacts and archaeology below the surface. So you see all these lumps and bumps and you think, crikey, what's that? Well, somebody has seen that as fun and driven their 4x4 over it. But of course, in doing so, it's churning it all up. It's a scheduled ancient monument. There's things under the ground that maybe yet haven't been discovered. But if you're doing that, you're, of course, you're damaging so much. And that's why these, incredible sites have the highest level of designation. We've got to look out for these sites. This isn't just a playground for 4x4s or motorbikes. This is an important part of our history, and there's still so much to learn from these sites. Here we are on the left-hand side at a Neolithic long barrow. So this is a historic monument, damaged in Alfriston, and can you see the tyre tracks going over the top of the barrow there? And on the right-hand side, you've got basically an earth mound construction dated between 3400 and 2400 BC. It's a funerary monument and burial place. It's a burial place, people, used by early farming communities. Okay, so driving your 4x4 over this is not good. Okay, it's churning up archaeology, but potentially, there's human remains in there. These are really important to us. Okay, they connect us with our history. And now I thought I put this slide in. This is really important, and it's lovely to see, blown up pictures of the horror that's gone on here in 2020 to a lot of scheduled ancient monuments again. Yes, it's great that people were getting out and enjoying the countryside and maybe understanding their history, but treating it like this is a massive no-no. Okay, and I won't read the article now, but if you want to read the article at some point, please feel free. I'll just move that slightly out the way there. Screenshot that or whatever you wish. Have a read. Really important. Chanctonbury Ring mentioned there. That is absolutely tragic that it's getting treated that way. So we need to look out for our heritage environment. Fly tipping for a moment, criminal offence. And like with graffiti, fly tipping attracts fly tipping. So if we don't deal with it immediately, you'll probably find there'll be even more. But also look at the environment and the impact that this will have on the environment. But also, if it's a heritage site, you know, we've got people coming up there, you've got young people, you've got people with dogs and animals, and think about all the nasty things that sitting in that fly tipping that could easily hurt or kill. So we really need to be thinking about fly tipping, reporting it. If it's not right, deal with it. You know, ring someone, tell somebody, report it. Illicit metal detecting is another subject that is a problem for our heritage, our shared heritage. It's vital that you gain permission to detect from the landowner and that any fines are reported. Provenance is everything, isn't it? If we don't know where something's come from, we know less about that site. It's absolutely awful that illicit metal detecting goes on, otherwise known as night hawking. And if it goes on and if it's sold, you know, to essentially to support a lifestyle, or maybe it's kept because, you know, that illicit metal detectorist just wants to keep those objects selfishly for themselves. What do we know about them? We don't know where they're from. They lose. It's stealing our history, isn't it? It's stealing our past. We know less about the object. We know less about the site. So it's incredibly frustrating when it goes on. Sisbury Ring is no stranger, unfortunately, to illicit metal detecting. There has been quite a number of incidents happen there in the past. Now, fortunately, not so many. A lot of work has gone in to try and reduce the problems there, and across Sussex as well. I should mention there's a lot of ethical detectorists that do it the right way, that record with the Portable Antiquity Scheme and that abide by the rules and law, and that unfortunately it's the minority, like with most things, spoiling it for the majority. And it's right that we support the, you know, ethical metal detectorists, because they are discovering history and they are sharing that. And, you know, history is important to all of us, and especially to those guys and girls that are out there doing the detecting, that do it because of their passion and love for history. So there needs to be a shout out for those that do it the right way. But I'm talking about those that don't, the minority, those that unfortunately are happy to steal our past and to make money out of our past. Not good news. And when I say illicit metal detecting, so telltale signs of that will be what you're looking at here. So square cut holes in the main, round cut holes. People will try and say to me, that's the work of an animal. It's not the work of an animal when it can cut a really nice square cut hole and then replace or place the topsoil and then the grass back in the hole that it's just dug. That's not the work of a badger. That's human. It's human interference. It's not good. But if you're seeing things like this on a scheduled monument, or anywhere, in fact, without permission, it comes down to landowners' permission. Scheduled monuments, a massive no-no. You can't detect on a scheduled monument, not without permission from Historic England and a license from them too. So you see anything like this, it's likely you've had a visit from somebody who has been illicitly metal detecting on your land. Here again, some more round holes, and you can see that lovely slice in the center picture there, clearly made by a blade, a spade, not a wild animal. And then on the right hand side, some signage, because it's important we get that kind of signage out there, isn't it, to try and tell people that that's not allowed. And I mentioned earlier about illicit metal, about sometimes people not knowing what they're doing is wrong, and education is everything in my mind. There's certainly scope here. I think when you look at illicit metal detecting, you'll have a small minority at one end that are doing it with knowledge. Okay, they know what they're doing is wrong, and then you've got a great swathe in the middle of people that probably just haven't got a clue. They've been brought a metal detector. Fantastic. Where do we go? Think of somewhere that's old. Let's go there. But they don't really know what they're doing. And then you, of course, got ethical detectorists at the other end that do it all right and record and, you know, so sticking to the rules. So there's lots of work to really be done on that far left-hand side in that middle chunk, where people don't really know what they're doing is wrong. And you'll see more here. And unfortunately, here's a job. So I speak about scheduled ancient monuments. This particular site is protected by the Military Remains Act of 1986. So it's the site of an American B-24 Liberator that crashed during World War II, called the Ruthless. And unfortunately, people, or somebody has come up here and thought it perfectly fine to dig around that and use a metal detector. Bad news. Not legal, not right. The Military Remains Act basically says anything being used during military service that crashed out of the sky or sunk to the bottom of the sea is immediately protected by the Act. So you cannot go and poke about around anywhere like this without license to do it, without permission to do it. Okay. So moving on, here we are. I'm just going to move my little picture out of the way. You may or may not be able to see my little picture. But firearms, ordnance and sharps. So raising awareness around militaria and firearms and their respective legalities is vital, especially around the Military Remains Act of 1986, which we just spoke about, and the Protective Recs Act of 1973 and the Theft Act of 1968. What does that mean? Well, here's some examples. So here is a number 5 Mills grenade from World War I. I will read this to you. A local charity shop in Worthing had a nasty shock last week when this hand grenade was found within a bag of donated items. Not knowing if a grenade was live, basically the Army Explosives Disposal Unit were called in to make sure that the item was safe. So this turned up at a charity shop in the bottom of the bag of donations. Not good news, not good news. So, of course, and rightly so, the area was made safe until EOD could turn up and make that decision. And that turned up in a charity shop. World War II, 2-inch mortar shells. We get a lot of these around the South Downs. Metal detectorists find these, and people finding, taking the dog out for a walk might well stumble across them. You see a fin like this, or you see anything like the right-hand picture here, then it's leave it alone, call the police. Okay, don't touch it. Very dangerous. And as you can see here, we've got a World War II 10-pound, where are we, practice bomb in the middle. This was found. Right thing, authorities were called, and actually it turned out to be a practice bomb. Good news. But you can see here on the right-hand side, that's what it would have looked like. So I can completely understand why somebody would have been concerned about that. Loft finds. Let's talk about that for a moment. We'll just hide that up there. What would you do if you found any of these? I'd like to think that you would leave them where they are and ideally ring the police. Okay, you don't know whether any of these muzzle loading pistols or whether any of these guns or these bullets or otherwise are live and dangerous. Okay, leave them where they are. That's the main message here. Don't touch. Okay, really important, especially again with bladed articles, anything like that. Call your local police. Okay, they have historic value, really, really important. But what we don't want is that going out into the public domain, into the street. That is really important. You ring the police. Here is a job of a machine gun which was recovered, and it was recovered from a Spitfire that was used in the Battle of Britain. And you can see here, the bottom left-hand corner, it's a Browning 303 Spitfire machine gun, was collected by the police, which was great, and eventually taken to RAF High Wycombe. Now, I am not going to go through all of this with you now, so I'll just move that picture of my face out of the way. So if you want to screenshot that or anything like that, you can have a read of that later. But also you can have a read of this too. This is a really interesting piece written about the plane and the pilot. Fascinating read. Please do take some time to read that. I'm sure you can screenshot that and have a nose. So let's move that little picture down again and for a moment talk about how is the historic environment protected. So I've been talking about all the horrible, nasty things that happen to the historic environment. How is it protected? Well, it's protected through designation. Designation highlights a building, site, or area's special interest and value to this and future generations and gives it protection under law or policy, for example, listing and scheduling. Okay, it allows us to protect, manage, enjoy, and celebrate England's historic buildings, parks, monuments, gardens, wreck sites, and battlefields, and many, many more. And Sussex has at least one of each. So some of the most important heritage assets in Sussex are protected through designation. The following are designated. So 667 scheduled monuments, 15,500 listed buildings, 2 registered battlefields, 75 parks and gardens, and 6 designated wrecks. But the most disturbing fact here, move me slightly out of the way, is 90% of the recorded heritage is undesignated and therefore not protected by law. So that's what I'm trying to say is this is really, really important that we look after all those World War II assets I was telling you about earlier. Not all of them are protected. In fact, there's a whole wealth of things that are not protected or designated in the same way as the scheduled monuments and as in the listed buildings. So if you know of any of these heritage assets, we need to be looking out for them, looking after them, because it's over 90%. So let's talk about acts and offences. You'll have heard me talking about acts and offences. You heard me talk about the Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Areas Act. Let's look at this. I won't go through all of them now, but if I move my little face slightly out of the way, you can screenshot this. You can look at some of these acts and offences, but these are just some of the ones that can be and are applicable to the historic environment. The Burial Act of 1857, essentially, don't touch or remove any human bones. You see human bones, you ring the police. Don't touch anything. Okay, you do not know how that's ended up there. It's not for you to decide. If you find a human bone, you leave it alone, ring the police. Okay. So what do you do if you see evidence of heritage crime? Well, you report it. Absolutely, you do. How to report a heritage crime? Well, here we are. I'm just moving me out the way again slightly. Let's put me there. I'm not going to read through this, but screenshot it, grab it, have a look at it. This is what you must do. And please do it. This is about looking after our heritage and our history. Please make that call. What can I offer? Daryl Holter, Sussex Heritage Community. Well, I give presentations very much like this presentation today. And of course, if you want me to come and give a presentation, we can do lots of questions and answers and all sorts of other things bolted on and attached to this as well. I visit heritage sites and help to raise their profiles, attend events with heritage crime displays, support partners and heritage crime community, increase awareness through social media, which I'm a big fan of. So Facebook and Twitter and YouTube for me. Create networks and partnerships, offer advice on heritage crime prevention, and write and share further guidance. And talking of guidance, here are some of the guides that I have put together. And you will see there's an advice to archaeologists, illicit metal detecting guide, safeguarding museums and collections, magnet fishing, advice to church wardens, and soon there will be a guide on open sites to heritage assets, a guide to looking after open sites, I should say. Social media, well, here's some examples of my social media. So top left is my Facebook presence, and then below that is my YouTube presence, and on the right hand side is Twitter. I'll also let's move that slightly. Sorry about that. So you'll see here, Facebook, I'm Sussex Heritage, Twitter at Sussex_heritage, and my email address, and YouTube is there. We have a website. You can find the current website on Facebook and Twitter. It is about to change, so keep an eye out for that. All I'll do is update that on my social media platforms, and at some stage we'll update it on here too. But you know, if you want to try and have a look at the website, please do, because that's where all the information is held. That's where all the guides are held. All sorts of interesting, helpful information is on the website. So that brings me to the end of this presentation. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's been informative. I hope you understand a little bit better now why it's so important to look out for our history and our heritage. I think it's just left for me to now say thank you so much for watching that presentation. Please continue to look out for our history and heritage, and I'll speak to you soon. So take care. Thank you very much. Goodbye.